right. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it might be, wherever you're logging in. Welcome. It's a pleasure to see you. We're here with FTT in an AI transformation webinar talking about agents. And if you do have your AI agent with you, call it, summon it, make sure they're listening, taking notes. Usually at this point in a Zoom call, we start seeing Otter AI and other products that are taking notes, joining as well. So we are truly living the future when it comes to understanding what AI agents can do for us and how they can make us work better and in different ways. And these are the broad topics. We have a wonderful slate of panelists for you, and we have a good set of questions to dig deep into AI agents. But before that, let's do a few intros. Myself, I'm Alexander Puutio. Among many other things, I teach at NYU Stern, and I'm taken on the foolish task of trying to write a textbook on AI for MBAs. And if nothing else, I've now had the chance of rehearsing my introduction. Thanks to many of you on this call and to my panelist colleagues who keep on reinventing what AI is specifically in the context of business. So I foresee myself drafting and redrafting the introduction as the evolution of this industry just keeps on getting pace. And in real fashion of talking about AI, I have asked AI for an introduction. It gave me a couple of good quotes. One of them is idea number one, inspirational opening. Artificial intelligence is not just a technology. It is a revolution reshaping the very fabric of our economic systems. And I'm sure with a little bit of prompt engineering, we could have gotten even deeper and gone further into this. But I'm sure all of you have experiences of using an AI of sorts. Today, as mentioned, we are talking about agents, which is a bit different than perhaps the large language models and the other forms of AI you've used in this that we've gathered, thanks to the FTT group, some of the world's best people to discuss this and go through this with you. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, as there's no way I could do honor to their background and the complexity of the work they do, I do want to remind you that there is a Q&A function for all of the audience. So we have our questions. What is much more interesting is going into questions that you have. So at any point, specifically after the first round of introductions, feel free to put your thoughts into the text box, and we will start going through what is on your mind in addition to our set of questions. But with that, let's do a brief round of intros. So we have Egor, Bogdan, and Alberto. Let's go in that order and sit with a brief hello to the audience and explanation of your career highlights and what is on your mind and what you'd like us to discuss when it comes to AI agents today. So Egor, please take it away.
Thanks, Alexander. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Egor, and I have been applying math and machine learning to solve real-world problems since the last millennium. I just love the sound of that. And done so across all sorts of organizational forms, from a non-profit in Ghana to a startup with 3 guys in a room and 2 large investment banks. And since 4 years, joyfully doing so at a scale up, which is Wise, used to be TransferWise, as its head of AI. And the fun thing about the AI field is just how huge it is. So there's there are from all the classic techniques that were there 10 years ago, and we thought that was kind of the limit, and then it keeps transforming itself. And then neural networks really burst into space about 10 years ago, and now last year large language models. And to do justice with large language models, as I see them applied in Wise and elsewhere, I've also just started a startup on the side, Multi-Recruited AI, which in my attempt to make multi-agent systems as I think they should be, as make them nice.
Wonderful. So in true AI expert fashion, we are reaching across the entire industry in many ways. I love it. Thank you. Bogdan, go to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bogdan, and thanks for having me in this important meeting. I'm a technologist by formation, corporate world, moved around industries, mostly at Apple, eBay, then Marks and Spencer, where I built the first natural language processing commercial grade in EMEA. A little bit before the first GPT came out, so before the end of 2018. Come from electronic and telecom engineering, but moved around the AI field, mostly in the last 6 to 7 years, within the natural language processing field and the observability and the security of AI systems, not just models. I usually give specialized talks at AI Summit, at the Army counterintelligence conferences on security of AI systems. And really what I'm after is just building things that just work. And since AI field it's so complex, that's a lot of noise, my mission is to cut through the noise and give everyone the necessary information for them to make the informed decision in their field to extract and create value from this kind of automation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bogdan. Cutting through the noise is exactly why we've convened here. And hopefully we'll give you as much signal as we can in the next 40 minutes or so. Alberto, go to you.
Thanks, Alexander, and thanks everyone for attending this roundtable. By means of introduction, I'm Alberto Romero. My background is in data engineering, machine learning, and Gen AI. I've spent the last 15 years building streaming analytics and predictive AI platforms in financial services across banks, hedge funds, etc. Prior to my current role, I was an AI startup co-founder and CTO for 6 years. And the company was acquired by a very large corporation end of last year. And then in January, I joined Citi as director of Gen AI platform engineering. I've been building multi-agent systems for quite a while. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And as hopefully you gathered, and I'm sure you know in the audience that whether it's the careers of our panelists, my textbook, or what you're seeing, there's a lot of evolution and at an incredibly rapid pace. So we're going to go through a set of questions that'll mix into the questions from the Q&A bank. So Victor, thank you. You get a special commendation for being the very first one to put your name and a question out. For the rest, like Lisa said, feel free to type them. I will monitor and I will sprinkle these in to our agenda so that we cover all of your questions as well as we can. But so at the risk of then potentially dating ourselves in a few years, we'll start with definitions. So this is perhaps the part where future generations who watch this webinar recording may want to skip because your definitions may be vastly different. But for June 2024, let's go through how do we define an AI agent? And specifically, how do we differentiate this from AI and automation? And if we start with Bogdan, then take the conversation from there. And as a reminder to the panelists, feel free to just jump on after your fellow panelist has concluded. So we'll do it in discussive format.
The terminology is quite old, actually. It's just being hyped right now. That's why we all hear in the last few months agentic AI and so back and so forth. This is not new at all. More than 7-8 years ago, when Dialogflow was acquired by Google for natural language processing, that's exactly the same terminology that was used, and rightly so, because, for example, a simple case is localization. Just getting the intent of a contact that calls your business or want to get in touch. So getting that intent, identifying that intent across jurisdictions, languages, and so on, so multiple locale, we define what is called agents. Now, they are not physical entities. They are exactly the expression of the same deep learning model at the back that are localized for those specific laws and legislations and regulation, as well as language and culture. For example, Switzerland has at least three official languages: German, French, Italian, and I think Romansh too. So there will be four agents, AI agents there, just for this specific. Belgium has at least two. There's a number of countries that have multiple locales. US has at least two, Spanish and English in terms of languages. So localization is needed, and it's unmanageable to handle it through one single agent, let's call it. That is one type of agents. Of course, there are other type of agents, let's say, where different models are involved. Natural language processing with a large language model used as generative, GPT style type of model. So we probably have at least two agents there that are coordinated and orchestrated to work together. For example, let's say agent assist function, again in a contact center, and industry doesn't really matter. Of course, there are differences, but it's the same principle. Somebody wants to get in touch with your business. You get the intent in a conversational way, zero friction way, a self-serve where it makes sense. That's the NLP part, which is non-generative. And then when the agent is assisting the customer, many times they need to refer to documentation, articles, knowledge base, and so on, internal to the company. But not just to serve articles and links to the customer, to the caller, or to the, but to actually extract the meaning of that in a nice summarized way and then work it out real quick and then present the answer to the customer. So that's where summarization and knowledge extraction comes into picture through generative AI model to help the agent be fast, accurate, and with really low friction interaction. Now, this is not exposed to the customer. The customer, in this case, it's really the agent, not the end user, but it saves a lot of time and it makes like the whole conversation flows. There will be references at the bottom, obviously the links to the big articles, but really they extract the information based on the context and the query of the customer right there after the customer went past the NLP. So we're talking here at least two agents. One is the NLP, the other one is the LLM, that are orchestrated together based on the need so that to serve the customer and deliver elevated experiences as well as elevated experience for the agent.
Perfect. Thank you, Bogdan. Egor.
Yeah, I would say that, well, first of all, of course, these days, as soon as something gets overhyped, journalists are not known for precision. So the word is used in all sorts of possible ways. I think when you read about AI agent applications these days, it has quite a precise technical meaning, which is your basic large language model, like GPT-4, is just you can put text in, you get text out, and maybe an image. And that's the end of story. And an agent is just a wrapper around that, which can take that text and interpret it to call some external resources and feed the result back to the LLM in the next prompt. So it's a loop around the LLM, which allows it to interact with the outside world. And that's all an AI agent is in 99% of the case when you read about one. And in general, I would say, as long as an agent implies some interactivity. So any kind of AI systems, which these days, as long as natural language is involved, probably involves an LLM that reacts to the outside world and reacts to the results of its actions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Alberto.
Yeah, so because my definition would be quite simple, and it's basically an AI agent is an entity that can take some human direction. It's got access to tools, whether it's information data or databases or APIs, etc. And then it's able to autonomously make decisions to arrive at a specific outcome. And that may well require several different loops or interaction across several different AI agents. So that would be my definition, and that's how you differentiate it from like standard automation.
Wonderful. And I think we're getting the full blast of this diversity. Really, I'd say, from my experience, depends on how you approach an agent, how you want to define it. But we're getting a common thread here. Love how Igor, you mentioned it. Often it's just a wrap around AI. It's how it manifests is what I take from Bogdan and Alberto. You're taking us closer to the use cases. I only add that there's another categorization you can do. You could call these agents, you could call them reactive, you could call them goal-based, utility-based. They could be learning agents. Depends on, again, what type of teleological function you might see, specifically once you have a web of these. And then many of you know that there's retrieval augmented generation agents that are all the rage. And I'm sure in the next time we meet here towards 2025 will have another acronym to share with you. But I love, Victor, your question. It does anticipate our next step in our agenda. It's going to the use cases. So broadly to the whole panelist group, how are we using agents? How are you seeing them used? What are the practical deployment opportunities here? And specifically, Victor asks in the context of financial services, could we provide examples of how these technologies are currently being implemented? We're getting a call out to customer services, security, document handling, wealth management. So Egor, I saw you unmute, so let's go to you first.
Yes, so I think there is a very simple common theme there. And the reason that large language models are such a big deal is not that they're so good at what they do. It's that the machine learning before them was all spectacularly bad at natural language. It was really terrible. People tried to do things, but it was very mathy and clunky and just didn't work very well. And now large language models are kind of comparable with an average human in their ability to react to natural language. And so the bulk of the applications just comes from the low-hanging fruit there. And so what's the biggest source of natural language information and output in any organization? It's the interaction with its customers. So customer support, analyzing customer complaints, KYC, all that stuff. That's where right now, as often as not, you actually have a human executing a script in a call center, which is probably doesn't provide quite the same level of customer care involvement as an actual script would. And the second one, especially in financial services, is then potential interaction with the regulators, where you need to provide documents of a very particular kind, which are not particularly creative, but quite time consuming. And so this whole interaction also happens with natural language, but in a very formal fashion. And that's the second front where we see a lot of applications. Though, of course, their care must be exercised almost more than any other domain.
Thank you for the call out to the low-hanging fruit, the rules, the regulations, the scripts. Indeed, that is it. Alberto, would you want to jump on this, and then Bogdan?
Sure. So I think the most important thing about LLMs is the capability of reasoning. And that's way more important than their capability of having some knowledge from the training process. And you see many people talking to LLMs and almost asking questions to get some knowledge out of them, almost as if they were Googling. But what is really groundbreaking is the reasoning capability. So I see LLMs as a reasoning engine. And your knowledge is what you supply to them almost, and they can reason over it. And that's essentially what RAG is, retrieval augmented generation. But in terms of AI agents, you can extrapolate that same idea to automation. So anything that is a repeatable process that requires a level of reasoning is always going to be a good candidate for AI agents. In financial services in particular, there's lots of use cases from customer support, so people opening tickets about issues they have, whether they are technical or non-technical. There are use cases around compliance, as has been alluded before. The compliance teams need to generate a lot of documentation based on a lot of input and based on specific reasoning, etc., etc. So, and that's a very lengthy process that can be that you can use agents for. But then also more into technical aspects, you can produce, say, for example, technical documentation from say code repositories is one of the latest things I've been working on. For example, just being able to, from our code repository, generate automatically all the documentation for that repository, which is a very arduous task that developers are normally quite lazy about doing. that's something that you can have agents or a multi-agent system to do for you, drawing the diagrams for you, understanding the code for you, the infrastructure components of your code, the actual module components of your code, etc. So yeah, those are the main aspects, I think.
Wonderful. Bogdan, would you want to add anything?
What it should not be used for, I think it's equally important. I will answer Christoph's question. It ties in with what we discussed now in the Q&A. So let me mark it. I lost his question. Okay. Right. Christoph Limmer question about monolithic, one does it all, or distributed, more specialized AI agents based on categorization of tasks at hand. Definitely not monolithic. Answer is because, well, first of all, automating CX doesn't work. It's exactly what it shouldn't be done. Do not automate the experience. Use automation to elevate the experience. So it's not it's a means to an end. It's not a means in itself. The more automation is done blindly because, hey, we can automate everything, the more distant the customer is from your businesses, from your brand. So it loses that personal touch because that's what automation does. It's impersonal. No matter how much you try to make it personal, it's not going to be personal. However, it can help deepening the personalization if it's used as a tool, for sure. And we've seen that with the proper self-serve, with get out of flow very easily, streaming services, right? It's very easy to get out of the subscription. It's all automated. It doesn't have to be AI, but it's the same principle. So automate what matters, where it matters. Don't make automation a purpose. That's not the purpose. The purpose is elevate the experience of both the business representatives and agents, as well as, of course, the end user and the customer. So for that, it's much better to have specialized AI agents, if AI is indeed the solution for the problem to solve, because it's not always, but sometimes it definitely is. And why monolithic won't work is because the experience, well, it's experience. You can't capture the experience into data. Right? Data has no value until it's being used. It doesn't have intrinsic value. If it's static and stays there for 1,000 years, it has that zero value. The moment it's being used, that's when the value is being constructed, and that's when it becomes valuable. So experience don't fit into data, but data definitely help experience a lot, right? The right data accessible at the right time helps it a lot. So if it's monolithic, there will be a lot of feedback loops closing into that monolith, going in, going out for a huge variety of purposes, unmanageable. It will just not work. With multiple agents, of course, there will be a lot of complexity. So the science is on the orchestration, not so much on the model itself, but how those models are called in together to fulfill a task and elevate the experience. That's where the challenge is, and that's where the value is in the orchestration when we talk about AI agents. Of course, that means the model have to be good, because if the models are bad, right, the orchestration is going to orchestrate something bad. So of course that goes without questions. But orchestration of those AI agents is where the value is.
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah. I actually would like to add a bit more on this distinction between what is the value add of large language models versus agents versus multi-agent systems. In my opinion, large language models are actually not very smart. They can forget things. They can answer the wrong question. So the most prosaic use of an agent pattern for me is to pair an LLM with a critic. And the critic can be purely deterministic, like this code you wrote doesn't even run. Or it can be a style critic with another LLM prompt. But anytime the LLM needs to keep refining its output until it's good enough, that's already an agent use case right there. And the Equally, for me, there is a very clear case when you need multi-agent, and it's nothing as esoteric or fancy as simulating a human organization. It's simply that each agent is just a wrap around a single LLM with a single prompt. Well, around a single prompt, and LLMs struggle with complicated prompts. So if you want LLM to do multiple things, each of which might need refinement loops, then you split your prompt into multiple bits, put each bit into a separate agent, and then, as Bogdan said, orchestrate them to work together. And that's why I think both regular agents and multi-agent systems are really the future, and raw LLM calls will only be used very rarely for like basic data transforms.
Perfect.
And
Thank you.
then I want to barge in a little bit. Dan has a very important question here in QA. I'm going to answer it live, and maybe my other colleagues can definitely add from the experience. This is very, very important question, as well as the previous questions that we already answered. So who is liable if an AI agent gives incorrect, biased information, misinformation? What happens to humanity when people trust blindly the automation and anthropomorphizes like AI girlfriends and all these things? Well, of course, like, very bad things will happen. Very bad things will happen because those are machines, right? Those are machines, they are not people. They don't feel. They should be treated as machines. And so, to your question, then who is liable? Well, whoever paid for it and deployed it is liable for the output. That's it. The law is a little bit grayish right now. It's getting there because there are a lot of complexities and differences in use cases. But assume the company that put that at the front, at the back, pays for it, takes the responsibility of the output in the end. I'm not saying this is completely right and nobody else should have responsibility. Of course not, but there's huge legal complexities around that I work on at the moment and in the last 2-3 years. But we've seen that chatbot at the aviation company that sold for like something like $1 flights. Then the company had to honor that. Obviously, the flights were not $1. Of course not. And they sued and say, well, we are not responsible. Well, who is that? It's the front of your company. And so they had to honor all those tickets at $1. It was ruled in the court of law. So assume that whoever deploys the chatbot or the model and pays for it is ultimately liable for the output. And we in technology, at least a lot of engineers like myself, we take this very seriously because we want to sleep well at night. And so we also assume a self-responsibility on how things are done and what we deploy around. So it goes throughout the chain, the engineers and the product owners and the stakeholders that pay for it. They all have a responsibility, but ultimately it's the company that deploys it and uses it and put it there up front to promote their business that is liable for the output.
Yeah, I would actually agree. And having been in the financial industry for a while, something very similar has happened to trading around 15 years ago, where all of a sudden it became crystal clear to regulators that it's important to have clear liability. And if you're head of a trading desk and then one of your traders, unknown to you, perpetrates fraud, you're liable, and it's your business to know. And it's the same thing with AI. If your bot, we should have a crystal clear legal framework. We shouldn't try to force people to make them safe in general, because that's a hopeless task. Just like you shouldn't try to forbid or regulate high-frequency trading systems directly. But you should say if anything bad happens, who is the person liable? And it should be somebody in the company who has the direct benefits. And if you have this liability crystal clear, if your bot insults the customer, this is the person who gets sued. This is the person who potentially goes to jail. Then the people will figure the rest out.
Indeed, and we'll leave some of these conundrums to our legal colleagues so we don't eat their bread by figuring all of this out. But thank you Egor for the back and forth. Alberto, in our early discussion, we talked a little bit about tech and the limitations. And you can see many in the audience are channeling these questions towards, well, the limitations of it. And I love one of the questions that came a bit earlier, but sorry, Ian, we're just getting to it right now, specifically on on-prem potentially becoming an appealing solution after now a couple of good decades of everything being done on someone else's computer somewhere else. And I'll also channel a bit on the questions of, well, how do you ensure compliance with all of this? What are some of the steps that big banks and large financial institutions are taking? And it might be really follows well from the conversation here. So Albert, would you want to kick us off on a bit of a discussion on the tech, the future of the tech, and what are big banks doing to remain compliant?
Yeah, I suppose it'd be interesting to look into the challenges that people are facing, and that sort of segues quite well with the previous bit of the conversation about you as a company, you need to do due diligence on what you are buying and implementing ultimately, because in generative AI, outcomes are non-deterministic, and hence they are difficult to test. They are difficult to do error control, for example. So that's a big challenge. How do you define your error control procedures? So there's always a good way out, even when things don't go to plan. And also touching on the aspect of the question you mentioned around the cloud and on-prem. Slightly long-winded answer, but bear with me here. But privacy is a very important aspect. The reason why it's important and the reason why it's relevant is because at the moment, the most powerful LLMs are still LLMs hosted by the likes of OpenAI. And hence, it can be very tempting to create a multi-agent system that is just using, say, GPT-4o, just because it's the most powerful LLM. But at the same time, depending on your use case, you may be sending a lot of sensitive data out there, and that's obviously a no-goer in financial services and any regulated business in general. Which I think is a good reason for the argument in favor of having models hosted by yourself, or models you can definitely control. You definitely have in an isolated environment. There's nothing going anywhere other than what you control. Open source models are not quite there yet in terms of their capabilities compared to GPT-4o. They very quickly catching up, mind you, and with some fine tuning is very doable to have a very appropriate model deployed on-prem that can serve your purposes for your multi-agent system. But then, other challenges include the likes of avoiding loops. For example, is super easy. I can't put into words how easy it is to build an agentic system that just falls into a loop. The other night, actually, I try to pay attention to that a lot, actually, and always have a good way out, etc. The other night, I was just playing around with a new multi-agent system, and I decided to leave it running for a little while because it's relatively complex. It accesses APIs, databases, etc. So I just stepped out for a second downstairs. I came back 20 minutes later, and it was stuck in a loop. Luckily enough, that was using a model I had deployed in a controlled environment. I wasn't targeting, say, GPT-4o or any other models. But that's the sort of thing that you have to be careful with. I would say AI agents are at their infancy at the moment. Frameworks, they are still very, very primitive. And you have to put a lot of code around them, a lot of safeguards to make sure they perform the way you want, and especially if you want them to be customer facing. By all means, that's super important.
Correct. Otherwise, you're selling your Ford Tahoe for $1, which I think, or sorry, Chevy Tahoe and the Ford F-150, which were pranksters were trying to get for $1 here in the US. And so to pick up one of the questions from Peter, Alberto, you went into error corrections before I hand over to Egor. Bogdan, if Alberto, you want to opine on how do we steer models to self-correct as they run? Is it possible? And speaking my second language here, I fully sympathize with you, Peter. I'm still waiting for Finnish to be included in most of these packages as the primary language. So Alberto, what do you think? And then let's go to Egor and have a chat with the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple ways. So AI agents can by all means take human input along the way. So that's one way. I think it's always a good idea to have a certain level of human input, especially when you're building something new that you're testing out and you want to avoid sort of the loop situation or other types of errors, etc., or them getting stuck. It also depends very much on the structure, on the hierarchy that you implement in your multi-agent system. So if you have a hierarchy where the data, the outcomes from different agents flow between each other, and the limitations are relatively clear in terms of what the role is per agent, because sometimes they won't know who to ask, what other agent to ask for a particular piece of information. Then they get stuck, then they start hallucinating, then they make some data up, etc. So it's important to have a good hierarchy controlling the full succession of inputs, human input, as I said earlier. Yeah, that's what I would say is are the most critical parts.
Wonderful. Thank you. Egor.
Let me add something here. I think way more important is the non-AI part, which is the quality of the connection. If that is patchy, no model in the world will make it good. You lose bytes, and if you can fill in to a limit, but if the connection is not good, there's nothing you can do. That connection has to be made decent enough. This is not a new problem, of course. This is a very old problem. So quality of connection is the most important aspect before anything else. The other aspect is the noise around, the surrounding noise, because we're talking voice, so I'm assuming it's video calls, audio calls, and things like that, not just text in typing. So the noise. Now there's technology that cuts through the noise. Nonetheless, when you speak over the phone, the bandwidth is really limited. It's like the voice bandwidth, so you can't do that much. But it has progressed a lot, removing that background noise and noise cancellation technologies and things like that. Again, you can compensate to a level better than before, but in the end, if that's very noisy, there's nothing you can do. You have to go somewhere a little bit quieter. It doesn't have to be quiet as in a church, not that quiet, but quiet enough so that to compensate. So quality of connection and noise, the two biggest factors, before even talk about automation and LLMs and AI. Next is, voice recognition, that's not LLM at all. And it's a very mature technology. It's been around for many decades. Now it's much, much better than before in the last 15, 20 years. So that can use AI, but not LLMs, and not generative AI is not needed. To essentially capture the sound that translates into text, it's speech to text, and then a large language model can be called in to get the intent of what been said. And not the meaning, because they don't have a word model, so they don't understand anything, but through statistical modeling, the correlation between tokens that they generate can get to, I would say, very accurate, if it's done well, very accurate result. But the LLM is really at the back, is never at the front. It doesn't have to be an LLM necessarily. Natural language processing has neural networks that don't use necessarily LLMs. It's a variety of means, but that's when machine learning and deep learning gets involved. And that's when the conversational flow start being set up in more detail. But that's step number 3. After quality of connection, background noise, and of course, voice detection.
Well, I would
Thank you,
actually
Bogdan.
disagree.
And Egor, before you go, I know
Oh.
we only have 5 minutes. So as you panelists go into what I imagine will be our last words, I want you also to take a look at the wonderful questions that came, because I think, Alberto, would you want to take a stab? I said we have 3 minutes before we have to say goodbye. So final thoughts and perhaps a few final answers.
Yeah, okay. So very, very quickly then, just picking up a question, what is the best strategy to transfer your internal enterprise knowledge to an LLM model? I wouldn't try and do that. You need to look for your specific use cases and then make decisions between whether you want to go with a RAG-like approach or you want to fine-tune a model to sort of incorporate some of the relevant knowledge into an LLM. I wouldn't just give all your internal knowledge to an LLM. It's not the best use of resource. It's not the best use of technology. Final set of thoughts then. Yeah, I would just encourage people to come into the topic with an open mind, with curiosity, and just willing to learn as much as possible. I certainly learn things every day. So yeah, definitely keep your eyes peeled for new things coming up, because this whole area is very much in its infancy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bogdan. Very last words. We have 2 minutes, and then
I
Igor
will
will
answer
back to
Ian's
you.
question about in-device based edge. I think they will be supposed to work in conjunction, not contradict each other. On-edge machine learning has been around for a few years. It's still new, but it's not that new anymore. Certainly that's the future, but it will always depend on a repository somewhere, on good network connectivity and connection, and will need even more stringent security that we have right now. So they don't really compete with each other. I don't think so. If anyone sees that as that, they're not going to be able to take advantage of the edge computing or vice versa. Having said that, public cloud is not necessarily the answer anymore. It's getting too expensive compared to what it was before. And the on-prem solution are getting cheaper and cheaper. And so there's really the case of deploying on-premise now and private cloud than just stick to public cloud. There's a place for everything, but now on-premise is much, much more attractive than, say, 5 or 10 years ago. A lot more attractive.
Perfect. Thank you. Igor, last words.
Yes, I think I would just like to say very briefly a couple of words on one topic which we unfortunately didn't get to cover, which is the augmentation versus replacement of humans by AI. And I think there the future will be that roles would get replaced, but humans will get augmented. And so many things will go from job descriptions to skills that a person has on the side. Just like you had typing pools in the old detective novels, or a typist was a profession. And these days, people just assume to be able to type. And I think many things which now describe perfectly reasonable jobs will become skills, thanks to our augmentation. And I have given several talks in the overall agent area, and all of the slides are on my LinkedIn profile. So please, if you'd like to discuss about any of these, don't hesitate to get in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I know you have the LinkedIn link at the FTT AI landing page for this event. Click those, connect with us. I will use my moderator powers to keep you here for 1 more minute, because I think, Effie, I want to answer very briefly, there's so much happening in the competitive landscape here. The more I talk to CEOs, both in established industry and those who are breaking into this, there's really two camps. Some say that it's the, there will be no Microsoft, Google, Apple in the next 5 years. Something else, Sam Altman or something else will come up. And the other camp says, well, it's only Microsoft in 5 years. Just give them enough time. And you'll have to be a bit of a tech historian to have some context on how these types of disruptions have been handled in the past, specifically when some of the entities have a lot of power, both lobbying and finances. So I'm perhaps a bit more on the team. Well, it'll be some of the bigger incumbents running this. And then Salim, to your question, there's no right answer to this, but again, a bit of a tech historian, you should look at when Sam Altman and these other teams have gotten started, how incredibly long it took. And as you heard from our team here, many of us have been working on this for decades before anyone thought to bring people together to discuss this. So it might be a bit longer than we anticipate, but as you know, the pace of the tech evolution just goes forward and forward. So it might take a bit less in the next iteration. With that, I think we've hopefully covered all of your burning questions. The panelists remain available to you. And I first want to thank the team. So we have Lisa, Malcolm, Adam, and Alicia, everyone who made this possible. It was wonderful to be here with you. It's the best way I can imagine starting a New York morning. And if you believe us in anything, take us on the lifelong learning aspect of this. You heard it from all the panelists. This is not just an event of hype. This is an inflection point in business, and that does call you and all of us to keep flexible, adaptable, curious, learning constantly. Said my textbook will have tens of different variations of this intro before I ever dare put it in print, and hopefully you'll take that as a cue to have a similar revisionist approach to what you think is the definition, use case, challenges, opportunities of AI. And if you are truly keen on living up to that promise, you should keep a close eye on what FTT AI Transformation is doing, specifically on the 11th and 12th of November. So there's a big event coming at the brewery in London. If you can make it in person, excellent. Would love to see many of you there as we talk business, industry, and how AI is impacting all of it. With that, apologize, and I'm very grateful for the 3 extra minutes we've stolen from your mornings, afternoons, and evenings. It was such a pleasure seeing you here. Thank you. And for those who watched the recording, thank you for hanging it out with us. And as said, stay in touch and continue growing the industry to wonderful places from here. Thank you.